domain expansion. In my opinion, the coolest concept to come out of Akutami Gege's JuJutsu Kaisen. Domain expansion is the ultimate technique of a JuJutsu sorcerer or curse user, creating an enclosed space and adapting it to perfectly reflect one's own soul, granting the caster unique buffs to their abilities, and offering a sure hit effect. Essentially, any attack made by the caster inside their domain is guaranteed to land on a trapped enemy. The main reason domains are so cool to me is because they offer all the hyper-specific rules of combat like Hunter x Hunter, but are as creative and varied as the stands from JoJo. A domain could be practically anything, which is why our topic today is so exciting. What if the Justice League had their own domains? We're gonna be covering a classic lineup of the Justice League: Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, and Aquaman. I considered including Martian Manhunter, Cyborg, Hawkgirl, and a few others, but I think these 6 are a really good spread. And if you have any other superheroes or villains you want to see domain expansions for, drop them down in the comments, and maybe I'll make another video. But enough intro, let's get into it. First up is the Man of Steel. Superman is famous for his kindness, but also his strength. He's traditionally the strongest member of the League and one of the most powerful heroes in the entire DC cosmology. There's a reason he's the one they send in to punch Darkseid in the face. Because he's so ridiculously overpowered, I figured his domain should reflect that. After all, similar top tiers like Gojo or Sukuna have domains that are infamous for being an instant win button for anyone they manage to catch. But because Superman is fundamentally motivated by kindness above all else, his domain shouldn't be one where he just heat visions you in the face instantly. So Clark's domain expansion will be Last Son of Krypton, reshaping the space to look just like the inside of his crystal fortress of solitude. His domain is massive, nearly a mile in diameter, to reflect his immense power. The primary ability of this domain is blue sun radiation. For those unaware, Superman's powers come from his Kryptonian biology absorbing the rays of our yellow sun. Because of this, he gets weaker under a red sun, but much more powerful under a blue sun. In this domain, his physical abilities will be amped. The actual amount a blue sun buffs him in the comics isn't exactly clear, but we'll say here that Clark will be operating at 2 times his maximum strength, speed, durability, all of that. Beyond that, Kal-El gets another unique ability under blue sun radiation: Superman Vision, or the ability to focus solar energy and channel it into other beings, granting them temporary Kryptonian abilities. Yeah, you heard that right. Post-Crisis Superman used this ability to supercharge his father, the human Jonathan Kent, and made him strong enough to fight off a bizarro version of Doomsday. Now, this is a little silly. I think I'd rather have Clark spread the ability by touch instead of a strangely colorful laser from his eyes, but imagine Superman is battling Darkseid alongside Batman and the Flash. And remember, we're going to get to their domains later in the video. If Superman opens up his domain, he instantly gets a 2 times buff and is able to grant Kryptonian strength and flight to his comrades. Talk about a win button. And what's great about this domain is it's not primarily for combat. Maybe there's an earthquake destroying a city. Superman can envelop an entire mile in his domain, granting the inhabitants powers to keep them safe and let them help with the evacuation. It's an ability that perfectly represents everything Superman is about, acting as an example and a symbol of hope. Next up is Aquaman. And this is a little difficult because he is one of the most undefined personalities in DC. Silver Age Aquaman is kind of goofy. 90s Arthur was totally the opposite because it was the age of grunge. He had his hand cut off and his baby died. It was the whole thing. DC AU Aquaman is kind of a big grump. Brave and the Bold Aquaman was the pinnacle of silly, swashbuckling masculinity. And of course, Jason Momoa's portrayal is a binge-drinking Samoan surfer dude bro. It's hard to imagine what his soul looks like, so it's hard to imagine what his domain looks like. But one thing always consistent about Aquaman is this: he's Atlantean royalty, born of both land and sea. So I am making his domain King of Two Worlds. Originally, I was going to call this domain Throne of Atlantis, but I actually think that would be better suited for someone like his brother, Orm. Let me know if you want to see me do villains in the next video. Anyway, it's very difficult to not just copy Dagon's domain bar for bar, a beautiful beach where enemies are instantly attacked by sure-hit sea monsters flying in from every angle. But because I want to differentiate a little bit, I'm going to play up the fact that Arthur is both human and Atlantean. His domain starts out as a giant open ocean, where enemies will instantly fall into the waters. Aquaman stands in the center on a tiny island. Everyone out in the water must deal with sure-hit attacks from sea creatures down below, like sharks and stingrays. But if Arthur taps his trident on the ground, the world switches into a giant open desert with a small oasis in the center. Anyone out in the desert is baked by a searing sunlight that continuously gets hotter the longer the domain is active. And Arthur is always safe in the center, and he can keep his allies there as well. It's great for dealing with enemies who can't survive well in one of the two environments that he is born from. A perfect reflection of Arthur's dual heritage. A king whose blood runs both through the seas and across the plains. Next up is The Flash. And then remember, after this, we've got Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and then Batman. Now, this Flash is Barry Allen, not Wally West. Barry is actually a total nerd. He's a very methodical and grounded personality. He's not that traditional ADHD goofball you expect a speedster to be. That's more Wally's thing. So Barry's domain should both reflect his immense speed and his powerful analytical mind. For the Flash, I've crafted this domain: absolute relativity. When Barry opens up his domain, the world around him shatters and is replaced with a white void that visually slowly fills up with shifting fractal images of everyone else trapped inside. Anyone caught in the domain is instantly frozen in place, the sure hit effect allowing Barry to speed steal from them without touching them. Now, speed stealing is something Barry can do normally, but he needs to be very close range, and it requires intense focus. It's actually a skill that Wally is much better at, but that's only half of it. Once Barry's domain is active, he can perfectly channel the flow of the speed force, not only through himself, but through everyone in his domain, shifting the effect of time on their physical form. He can age them, or de-age them, or even alter them into a less powerful version of themselves by looking through the multiverse and shifting the vibration of their molecules to match that of a multiverse counterpart. Barry could trap Mirror Master, then turn him back into a baby, or shift his suit into a normal thread suit and tie from an Earth 8 dimensions over, where he never became a supervillain. This is a riff on Barry's ability to use the Speed Force to both travel through time and across dimensions. Much like Superman, the Flash is consistently one of the most powerful heroes in the verse, and so his domain should reflect that. If Superman is Gojo, then I'd liken Flash to someone like Yuta or Ghetto. Definitely a special grade, but would still consistently lose to the top dog. In that vein, I think the Flash's domain should also be pretty big, probably at least enough to fit a city block, but it should have a super strict time limit. Barry can only keep his domain open for about 5 seconds before he gets exhausted. Ample time for his super fast brain to analyze all the possible timelines of every enemy he captures and alter them. But it's also enough of a limit that his attacks could be prevented if an enemy manages to catch him off guard. Someone else similarly fast, like Reverse Flash or Superman. Now for Wonder Woman. Remember that special grade sorcerer analogy from earlier? Well, if Clark is Gojo, then Diana is absolutely Yuki Tsukumo, very near the pinnacle of power in the league. What makes Wonder Woman so fascinating is her dichotomy. On the one hand, she has a superhuman gentleness, able to perfectly commune with nature and animals. She can calm a herd of raging elephants in an instant. And she's the go-to diplomat of the JLA, an expert at conflict resolution and international relations. But on the other hand, she's also the greatest combatant on the planet, a goddess of war capable of toppling empires and throwing hands with brutal monsters like Ares, Steppenwolf, and Darkseid. For that reason, I think her domain should represent a humble strength, equally valuable in diplomacy and combat. Wonder Woman's domain is Blessings of Olympus. Diana's domain appears like the court of Themyscira, her home in the native island of the Amazons. Inside her domain, she instantly dons her golden eagle armor, an Amazonian relic worn by the warrior Asteria that grants a significant buff to her defense. Anyone else caught in her domain is immediately ensnared in the Golden Perfect, or as you might know it, the Lasso of Truth. Instead of the sure hit effect being explicitly violent, here it has the potential for other uses. Anyone caught in the lasso must tell the truth, but that's not all. Inside the domain, the lasso also connects to Diana, allowing her to read the thoughts and true intentions of those wrapped in it. If she's fighting an enemy, this gives her perfect precognition. Imagine Spider-Man's Spidey sense, but on steroids. She can tell exactly how someone is going to attack and in what way. And if Diana opens up this domain in a diplomatic setting, her connection through the lasso gives her perfect information for negotiation. What someone is actually thinking, what they want most, and best of all, they can't even try to persuade her through lying. While this domain isn't the strongest in terms of directly overpowering the enemy, it has some of the greatest versatility. And in the hands of someone as intelligent and creative as Wonder Woman, it transforms her into either the ultimate peacemaker or the ultimate killing machine. Hal Jordan, the greatest Green Lantern and original JLA member, is next. If you know anything about Hal, he's had sort of a troubled history. He's very cocky and hard-headed, a personality he developed through a life of continuously standing up against fear and overcoming it. Usually that makes him a great hero, but after the destruction of his home, Coast City, it turned him into Parallax, a supervillain that overtook Oa and used all of the Green Lantern rings and batteries for himself. I think if Hal had a domain, it might look slightly different depending on when in his life he opened it. Sort of like how Megumi's original domain wasn't complete. Parallax's domain would be a dark facsimile of Green Lantern's true domain, a domain that I have dubbed Emerald Twilight. When Hal opens up his domain, it takes the image of Ferris Air, the airway where his father died, where Hal first learned to face his fears, and where he met the love of his life, Carol Ferris. In the domain, the sun is setting, and of course, that sun is green, casting a verdant light onto everyone inside. When active, Hal's ring and power battery are immediately filled to 100%, and his energy is overcharged, as if there were a blue lantern in his presence. Everyone inside the domain is basked in green light, and this is where the sure hit effect comes in. Hal can create and use constructs within his domain that appear from anywhere the light touches. They don't need to originate from the ring like they usually do. So if he trapped Sinestro, a green fist could simply appear out of the air next to him to sock him in the face. Hal wouldn't need to launch one from his ring. Consider that removing this limitation also means he can create as many constructs as he wants simultaneously. And you probably get how much of a crazy buff this is for Hal. It's an overwhelming force of willpower, banishing fear even as the sun sets from brightest day to blackest night. Speaking of blackest night, finally, we have Batman. I mulled over this one a lot. It's not hard to understand his personality and psychology. Bruce Wayne is, at his heart, a sad and frightened little boy who just suffered a great tragedy. But he's built up around that little boy the fiercest, strongest, most impenetrable, and daunting set of walls ever. He turned himself into the Dark Knight, into Batman. He's an agent of order and vengeance who values life above all else, crafting a visage of fear to intimidate and dissuade the suspicious and cowardly lot of criminals that plague Gotham City. I understand who Batman is very well. The problem is balancing the power level of his domain. Yes, Bruce is a member of the Justice League and extremely formidable, but he famously has absolutely no superpowers. He usually overcomes metahumans by using trickery, meticulous planning, gadgets, and ingenuity. It would seem kind of odd for him to just pop open his domain and one-shot someone like Mongol or Parasite. So I considered not giving him a domain at all. Batman has no powers. Maybe his JuJutsu Kaisen analog is Toji, who has a heavenly restriction. But as cool of an idea as that is, I don't think it works. That's just the equivalent of giving Bruce super strength, super speed, super durability, which defeats the whole point. Instead, I've devised a domain for Batman that very clearly amps him up, but plays on his strengths without giving him physical abilities on par with the rest of the league. His domain is called The First Truth of Batman. Batman's domain looks like an alleyway in Gotham City, the bat signal displayed prominently in the sky up above. The domain covers anyone trapped inside in the shadows of the night so that they can't see Bruce, and what follows is a vicious assault from all sides. The sure hit effect of this domain generates phantom versions of the entire Bat family, all cloaked in shadow. Dick, Jason, Tim, Damian, Stephanie, Barbara, Kate, Luke, Jean-Paul, all of them swarm the enemy with can't-miss attacks. But they aren't the only ones here to help Bruce. The secondary ability of this domain is that Bruce can summon and use anything he may have on hand in the Batcave, but not available on his person. Extra tools, weapons, suits, armors, vehicles, as long as it's something Bruce knows he has in the Batcave, he can summon it and use it in his domain. In this way, it doesn't give him access to anything he wouldn't have prepped already, so it's not exactly a win button. He can't just make something up. But if he has the Hellbat armor fully operational at home, he can use it inside his domain, making very short work of his enemies. Anything he entrusts Alfred to watch over, he has at his disposal in his domain. When Bruce was a boy, crying over the corpses of his parents, he was soon joined by a kind Commissioner Gordon who returned him home to be cared for by Alfred. When he nearly died from a scorpion sting while battling Ra's al Ghul, it was Talia that gave him the antidote. And here, when backed into a corner, Bruce is joined in his domain by the extensive Bat family that love and respect him, because the first truth of Batman is that you are never as alone as you think you are. Thanks for watching.